Can India have freedom of speech like the US in the future? Does the US have complete freedom of speech? I don't think so. There are so many things you can't say in the US. I mean, before Elon Musk took over Twitter, Twitter was under the administration and ownership of Jack Dorsey, wasn't it? And they were shadow banning so many people. They were permanently banning people. They permanently banned the sitting president of the United States before the next president took office, right? They banned Donald Trump. Do you call that freedom of speech? There's so much you can't say in the US. You'll be cancelled. So technically, it may not be illegal, but if you say it, then you will have real world consequences, very rapid and very harsh consequences. You'll be cancelled. If you are a famous person and you say certain things, you will lose all your brand deals, all the contracts. You'll become penniless very quickly. So there's no freedom of speech in the US. You can say things that are socially acceptable or acceptable uh, in the current scheme of things, but you can't say things that are not acceptable in the current scheme of things. Uh, so I don't see the US as a nation that has freedom of speech. And even if you technically may have that, uh, there's no freedom of consequences from speech. And when it comes to India also, so there is no society where you have complete, absolutely universal freedom of speech. And even if you may technically have that on paper, you cannot say things and expect there to be no consequences for what you have said. So that sort of idealistic utopian world doesn't exist. There are always consequences for your actions and for your speech. And so the US has a whole bunch of things that you can't say and a whole categories of things you cannot say. In India, there's a whole different category of things you can't say. India is a socialist, secular nation. There are certain individuals you cannot criticize. If you criticize certain individuals who I'm not naming, by the way, then you go to jail and you will be oppressed, and all kinds of terrible things will happen to you. And that sort of thing. And there are certain other things you cannot explore, certain things you can't say. And so that's just how it is. Go to other countries. Go to Canada, for example. You can't say a thing. Uh, there are lots of things you can't say in Canada also, right? The Canadian government has its own super fascist approach to things. Mr. Trudeau will talk about freedom of speech and democracy and blah 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 in India, but when it comes to the same kind of protests in Canada, he will crack down upon them brutally. So there's no real such freedom anywhere in the world, even in the so-called liberal West. So yeah, I don't think it's ever possible. And do we really want absolute freedom of speech? Do you want people to have the right to say absolutely anything? I mean, there are things that are actually criminal, right? I mean, there are a whole bunch of categories of actions that are classified as crimes. And some crimes are really heinous crimes. Do you want people to have the freedom to say that these crimes are fine and to promote or justify or glorify such crimes? It doesn't work like that. So there can never be any absolute complete freedom of speech anywhere in the world. And the US certainly is not that sort of nation where you have genuine freedom of speech. And neither is India. That's just the way it is.